what I like to do was take my film after I developed it and I would burn it with a lighter. That would leave some cool looking effects, really distort the film and melt it in some cool ways.
Danielle Cecil, a recent BFA graduate of Saginaw Valley State University, uses a large format film camera to capture images related to childhood traumas in her current exhibition, On Thin Ice. This exhibition can be viewed in the Artisan Wing of the Saginaw Art Museum. Today, we learn a little more about Cecil's work and process. Make a plan to visit the museum and see the exhibition for yourself. Danielle Cecil is with us today. Danielle, appreciate you coming on the podcast. And right now, you have an exhibition here at the Saginaw Art Museum. And I would love to learn a little bit more about yourself and a little bit more about your process in photography, and go from there. You are a graduate of Saginaw Valley State University. Tell me a little bit about your background in photography and how you ended up using that as your medium.
Well, growing up, I was always kind of into photography, but I never really could afford a nice camera. So I used a little point and shoot and, so that kind of got me into it. I actually started at SVSU as an elementary education major. So that I'm not really sure what point in time that switched over, but I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. So I stayed at SVSU and joined their art department. And I really wasn't sure what I was doing. I was planning on going into graphic design, but it switched over to photography. And then I found myself absolutely loving film. So I started with the intro to photography class, developing film. I had never taken a photography class before. That was my first with Professor Hideki. So I loved that. And then I found myself getting into color film. I was developing that at home, doing a lot of work at home. There was a point where I had broken my shoulder, so I had to take a semester off for that. But from the color photography, I really started getting into destroyed films and other types of films. And so I would put different chemicals on my film, see what would happen. And then I liked the aspect of the large format film camera. So Hideki really got me into that. That's where that started. So my process as far as that whole series went with that specific camera, I did a lot of journaling for a lot of the events that I went through as a child. So a lot of the time I would just kind of throw up on the paper and I would just write all the words down that would come to mind with the situations that I was having a hard time with. And either it would kind of just naturally come to me, or I felt like I would have to find something, but I would find these found objects that I felt related to me or my story or the event some way. And most of them are destroyed in one way or another. So either the object is destroyed or the film itself are destroyed or the print is destroyed. So in one way or another, there's all kind of some damage on there kind of relating to myself. So that's kind of how that started.
Yeah, I noticed in a number of pieces how the print itself, looks like it had been crumpled up and then unfolded again. And you had mentioned this idea of destroyed film. For listeners, can you describe what that's like a little bit more?
Sure. Destroyed film. So some people will do it with chemicals either before or after they develop, and they'll put some type of chemical in there. Some people I've seen use nail polish or just really anything, and they'll put it in their film just to see what it does. A lot of the time it'll distort the colors or something along those lines. What I like to do was take my film after I developed it and I would burn it with a lighter. That would leave some cool looking effects, really distort the film and melt it in some cool ways. And then I also like to scratch my actual film after I develop it as well, so I can um, scratch out particular places that I don't want there. Um, so I can see exactly where I'm going with the pin or whatever it is I'm using to scratch that. So there's multiple ways to destroy film or prints, but those are just a few.
Yeah, I suspect for many, opening the back of the camera and letting all the light in is enough destruction for most. But it sounds like you've taken things to a new level there. And I imagine there's a bit of,
I do enjoy it.
Yeah, I imagine there's a level of unpredictability that happens when you go through this process.
Absolutely, yes. Sometimes you really don't know what you're going to get, depending on chemicals especially. You really don't know what's going to come out, where the chemical is going to be placed on the film. You don't know what it's going to look like in the end. That's why scratching, I can have a little bit more control over it. Burning, same with that. I think burning's kind of in the middle, though. Sometimes you really don't know what you're going to get, but it's fun.
Yeah. I'd love to hear a little bit more about this process of using your journaling and your photography together, and the way that the words on the page may have informed some of the images that you produced here, and how that worked out in terms of some of the timing and the found objects. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So, as far as the journaling goes, it would relate to, like I said, the events that I went through as a child. So I went through some not great things as a child, as many people do. And a lot of the things came from people that were very close to me or relatives, and like physical abuse, emotional, mental, and a lot of it to do with my weight at the time as well. So for an example, there's one photograph in there that's a picture of one of my figure skates. I was a figure skater for many, many years as a kid. And so kind of the aspect of that, writing down my feelings as to certain people that weren't around for that aspect of my life. So how angry I was, I would write down all of my feelings or anything that really came to mind and kind of manipulate it to see what I could do as a photograph out of it. So for like my skating, some of my family just wouldn't come to any of my competitions or any of my shows, weren't supportive, certain people. So it was a lot of taking out anger against that. I think most of the work is really taking out anger against the specific events in general. So any of my private like journaling stuff kind of got turned into a photo in one way or another.
On this podcast before, we've talked a little bit about the way that art can be used as a form of coping or a response to difficult situations, specifically through this pandemic. How do you feel like making how do you feel like making the photographs has sort of influenced the way that you're able to work through some of these processes now? And do you feel like there's been a type of healing that's happened, or do you feel like there continues to be sort of this drive to use your background as a source for creating more material?
I do feel that specific series did help me a lot. That was really my first way of trying to cope with these things. Growing up, I didn't have therapy. I didn't do any of that. So I wasn't really sure how to deal with these things that were coming up. But I do feel that series did help me a little bit. And I also found a route to take my anger out, or, just a coping mechanism in general. So now I do find myself often pulling the same kind of events out of my head and still working with those. So I do still continue to do work based on those things, but I do also feel that did help me when I did that series.
Shifting gears just a little bit, I'd love to hear more about working with the large format photography and sort of the background to that, a lot of people are moving towards digital media. And so the process of working with a large format camera, maybe you can describe that for our listeners a little bit more so that they have a picture of what that's like.
The large format film, it's kind of similar to what you might see in like a cartoon, where it's the guy bent over underneath the black sheet doing, or like the old style kind of cameras you kind of typically picture, I guess. So it comes in a huge trunk that you have to carry around. So I looked kind of ridiculous carrying this around campus all the time, but and then you have to set it all up. It takes a few minutes, and then it takes a while to get it in focus. You have to slide the camera back and forth on this bar to get it perfectly in focus. And for me, it would take a while. My eyes would play some games on me. So, but then to be able to see what is behind the camera, you have to use that black sheet to black out the light, so you can't see what you're looking at. And interesting enough, it is upside down in the camera when you're looking at the back. So sometimes that does throw off your vision as to what you were trying to create. Sometimes things compositionally don't line up exactly what you were picturing, but I like the whole process. I'm very much a process person, so I enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I imagine there's a level of commitment to the photograph once you bring the camera along and get it set up, and there's a little bit more deliberateness about where things are placed.
You really have to, it's not just a one snap kind of thing like it is with even a regular 35 millimeter film camera, because you have more than one in there. With the large format, you only have two pieces of film within the carrier. So it's really, you got to pay attention to what you're doing before you hit that shutter and click it, because you don't really want to waste film either. So
looking sort of towards the future, I'd love to learn more about maybe projects that you're working on right now, or where you hope that your art takes you, if you have those plans in place, or some particular goals in mind.
I don't have particular plans in place necessarily. I do continue to work on my art. I haven't been doing film as much just because I don't necessarily have a dark room to work in at this point. I do develop film here and there, but I have mostly been doing a lot of painting and drawing, actually. I'm still doing my digital photographs, though. In the future, I do plan to always do my artwork, but I also would like to do maybe some sort of commercial side of photography at some point. So we'll see where things go. I have a very open mind. I don't really have a plan set in place with my artwork at this point.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, Danielle, I really appreciate you giving us a little bit background about the photographs in the exhibition. And we look forward to continuing to watch where your creative path takes you.
I agree. I'm excited to see where it takes me as well.
Thank you for listening to the Saginaw Art Museum podcast. You can stay connected with the museum through our website and social media channels. We invite you to become a subscriber of this podcast or become a monthly contributor to the show to help us carry out our mission of providing art for all.